code both committees, the Housing and Human Welfare Committee and the Housing and Community Development Committee. And you can see that the description of the Housing and Community Development Committee is pretty extensive. Basically, the committee is made up of the 3 alderpersons who are on the Housing and Human Welfare Committee, and the chair of the Housing and Human Welfare Committee is also the chair of the Housing and Community Development Committee. Then the next member would be the designee of the Housing Authority, president of the commission. So it would be, in this case, Jackie Wells was designated. So she is the member from the Housing Authority. And then there are 3 other residents of the city that have an interest in housing and community development. So the committee meets monthly, and the actions of the committee must be a majority of vote of the members, and 3 of the members of the committee constitute a quorum, provided that no fewer than 2 aldermen are present. So basically, you have to have 1 person and then the 2 aldermen to have a quorum. So the committee itself plans, implements the housing and community development projects throughout the city, exercises all the powers and functions of redevelopment and urban renewal. We actually had an instance where the committee had to exercise its urban renewal authority in the Clay Street neighborhood. So we've actually done that. But basically it's manage and improve housing stock in the city, coordinate state, federal, private resources towards development activities, perform other duties and functions which shall be assigned to it by the city council. All policy, program, and administrative actions taken by the committee must have the concurrence of a majority vote of the membership as provided in the section I just read, and must be submitted to the city council for consideration and approval. The last sentence where it says that can they review and approve personnel is illegal because only department heads have the authority to do that. So, yeah. But this was written back in, I think, in the 60s. So some things have changed, and I think at some point we probably need to revise some of this. So that's what the committee does. And then the Housing and Human Welfare Committee basically considers issues of housing, general health, welfare, quality of life, and reviews all proposed amendments to Title 8, Title 10, and Title 18, Landlord and Tenant Relations. Just for your information, we also have a Human Relations Commission who handles landlord and tenant relations, and we also have an organization called Baltimore Neighborhoods Incorporated, which manages and provides assistance for tenant and landlord relations to city residents. It's called BNI, Baltimore Neighborhood Incorporated. And they do tenant landlord. We used to have a staff person in the mayor's office that was the constituent person that helped out with some of our this all relates to fair housing, and then there's a whole fair housing law, and that's covered by the Human Relations Commission. So he would help out with some of this stuff, but so that's the difference. That's basically the difference between the 2 committees. Just the standing committee members. Okay, so you had based out, so now that you know that the Housing and Community Development oversees all the housing and community development activities, I'm going to go through what those are. So basically, we have a division of Community Development Division, which is me. I don't have any staff, it's just me. And I oversee the Community Development Block Grant Program, the Homeowner Rehabilitation Program, the Community Legacy Program, which is now called Sustainable Communities, the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, the MPDU Program, and Clay Street Revitalization. So
I'm going to plead ignorance here. What is the MPDU program?
The Moderately Priced Dwelling Unit
Oh,
Program,
yes,
and I
yes,
will
yes.
get to that.
Yes, yes, yes.
I have a whole. So that's basically what I oversee. Some of these programs are funded. CDBG is funded annual. It's considered an entitlement from HUD. We get $230,000, which we use to leverage a lot of other money. That CDBG process is what the Housing and Community Development Committee is going to be going through starting in January through April. It's a whole process of applications come in, they're reviewed by the committee, presentations are made, staff makes recommendations, committee approves or disapproves recommendations, it goes in an action plan that has to go before the city council and that has to go to HUD. And it's a process, and I will give you a flow chart next time on how that all works. The Community Legacy Plan, or Sustainable Communities Program now, is a competitive grant process, and luckily the city's been very successful in getting funding. I mean, we've gotten over close to $2 million over the years. Originally, it started out in the Clay Street neighborhood, and there was a whole community legacy plan, so there's a whole plan for the Clay Street neighborhood.
What's the cycle on that grant? When do
Yearly.
we apply? We apply when?
Yearly, and probably in June or July.
And have the funds been approved for fiscal year 18?
No, not yet. They haven't.
Okay.
The legislature hasn't voted on them yet.
Got it.
That's state?
Just to, yeah,
State
it's state. It comes from the Department of Housing and Community Development. Just to give you an idea, we applied for, just the year before, we applied for the Lighthouse Bistro and were awarded $200,000. But
Congratulations on that.
It's very competitive. Last year, the city applied. I didn't do the applications. One came out of Public Works and the other came out of Timothy House, Homes for America. Neither one of those got funded. It's a very, very competitive process. Another competitive grant that we get is a state grant, same Housing and Community Development. We apply for the Lighthouse Shelter every year. We usually get 100, 120, depending. Last year we got 116,000, but we apply for that every year, and we typically get it. The other funds that we have available to city have available is we have a $200,000 revolving loan fund. It's money again that we got from the Community Legacy / Sustainable Communities Program. It revolves. We've used it a number of times, mostly in the Clay Street neighborhood, predominantly with Habitat for Humanity. Basically, we use it to buy and fix up a place. We give the money to Habitat. Once they get everything done and they sell it, the money comes back and we keep revolving it. And then we have the Homeownership Assistance Trust Fund. I think I called it housing, but I think it's which is money that comes from developers that can't develop MPDUs because they can't use the density bonus, and so they have to pay money into this fund. And I'm going to talk about that whole fund in another slide. So that's basically where our money for the division comes from, plus our general funds. My salary pays the general. It's paid out of general funds. We don't take money out of block grant to pay. Because in addition to this, I do other stuff too. Anything that comes up with any housing issue, so.
Are there any city funds that support the improvement projects that are undertaken by the committee? Or is it all grant funded?
It's pretty much all grant funded, although there's a pot of money called community grants, which you're going to learn about, which is run by finance office, and it's about a $300,000 mayor's budget item that funds community services that relate to helping low and moderate income people or the arts. Our block grant that we get, the $230,000, we can only use $35,000 of that for public services. There's a 15% statutory cap on public services, so the majority of the money has to go to capital projects.
Could you, 15% statutory cap on, what was that again?
CDBG.
And what is it prohibited from using?
It has to be used, 15% can only be used on public, what they call public service.
Got it.
Like operating funds.
Thank you.
Fred, would you like this? Get in here. Let's bring it up. So that means we only have like $35,000 spread out between 10.
Yeah. Thank you. I recognize that we're being joined by Alderman Payon. Good evening, sir.
Thank you. Good evening.
Okay.
Teresa, question on the grant writers. Is that the same people assigned to the grant writing, or
I write all the grants for.
You write all the grants? Okay, I thought you had mentioned.
I write all the grants for housing and community development projects.
Okay. Wow, thank you. Yeah. And do you feel like there's a risk in the current, on a federal level, are these grants, is there a risk in amounts,
Well, there was a risk with the community development block grant program. Trump's original budget axed it out.
Yeah.
But it's my understanding that there was a big hue and cry. So at least for the next year, we think we're going to be level funded.
Oh, okay.
So, but now that they've done this tax plan, and now they're going to start looking for ways to cut. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen.
It's there, the narrative from Washington is that with the tax plan providing tax relief to business owners, that business owners will now become the new funding source for a lot of grants as opposed to grants from the government. So I guess we will want to keep an eye out for if that ever makes its way full circle and then our private sector becomes a large source for grants. Do we have any grants now from private sector, or is it all?
It's foundations.
Foundations do provide as well?
Yeah, there's different foundations. Like a lot of our organizations get money from foundations, like the Lighthouse gets, there's the Weinberg Foundation and the Able Fund, but they typically don't fund local governments. They fund nonprofits. So we're not going to get foundation. The city's not going to get foundation money. It's going to go to nonprofits. Okay, so I mentioned the community development block grant program. In the process, we have something called a consolidated plan. At some point, I'll make sure you get a copy of it. But basically what it states is what we're going to spend our money on. And these are I just gave you a list of the goals and objectives for your information. I don't think we need to go over them. You can just read them.
Thank you.
And if you look at the next page, this is kind of examples of past and present CDBG recipients. So you can kind of get an idea by looking at that.
What did the YWCA receive funds for?
YWCA, they had, that was a while back. I don't think I can remember. It was some program. I really can't remember. It was quite a while back.
I know they have a new domestic violence safe house that they're opening.
It wasn't
there.
for that. It was it was for a program, but I just can't remember the program because that was a while back. Some of this was for playground equipment. A lot of it is for programs. All different things. And then there's some pictures of them later on. Now, I talked about the Sustainable Communities Community Legacy Grant, the one that we got about $1.6 million for. The majority of that money was spent in the Clay Street neighborhood, and this is kind of a listing of all the projects that we did in that neighborhood with community legacy money. I mean, basically what we did is we fixed up as much housing as we could that was owner occupied. We did a facade program. We did the insides with CDBG money. We used community legacy money to tear down some of the public housing and to allow Habitat to put those 10 homes up, and then we provided settlement expense costs to the for the people that we did the kiosk on the corner of West Washington and Washington Street. That has a history of the neighborhood. We redid Town Pines Court, basically. So there's a lot of things that we did, and like I said, there was pictures. We contributed money to the Bates Heritage Youth Development Park, which was the Cal Ripken, and we did the Lighthouse Bistro. So
was there a particular, it looks like the Clay Street area was a real area of focus. How did we identify that?
That was identified back in 2001. The Clay Street neighborhood was the only neighborhood that had an official revitalization plan. And basically what we did was we took the revitalization plan and updated it, because the nature of the funding for that program was to upgrade neighborhoods that were had issues, you know, physical issues and other issues. So the community, the Clay Street neighborhood fit the definition of what the state was looking for in terms of a community legacy neighborhood. So, and that neighborhood was designated. Then later on, the Bates neighborhood was designated. And then the state changed their program. So now, I didn't put it in here, but I can give it to you. So now all of West Street from one end to the other is designated. That's how we got the Lighthouse Bistro project. So it's a bigger area. We included Newtown so that we'd be able to use community legacy money to for that redevelopment. So
have we done any there yet?
Well,
I know the playground.
Unfortunately, they lost their funding. They were awarded money for demolition when they had the original project, but that didn't go forward, and they didn't. So they lost their funding on that.
Teresa, the Whitmore garage design, is the Whitmore garage a county garage?
It is a county garage, but at the time, that was one of the things that was in the Clay Street revitalization plan that was done by the neighborhood. They really wanted the garage torn down, but you know, that wasn't going to happen. So we came up, they gave us money to do a design, which was really, really nice, but we could never get the county. Back then it was Janet Owens. We just couldn't get her to talk about funding it, but I have the design in my office. It's really cool. It's like that whole length of West Washington Street, doing pictures of what the community was, not what it was like, but like themes from the community when it was a vibrant community, all done in like mosaic. It's really a cool design, but
so it's art, it's artwork, it's murals
artwork
of some sort.
Yeah.
Really? Wow. Yeah, we'll look at that.
Yeah.
That's.
But
yeah.
nobody wanted to. So. We were able to get the kiosk up, though. We were able to get the thing that kiosk on West Washington and Washington Street, which depicts the history of the neighborhood, and that we got from the legacy money. So the emergency, I talked about the emergency solution grant, the money that we give to the Lighthouse, or we don't have to give it just to the Lighthouse. But basically what they use that money for is their shelter operations, and they use it for something called rapid rehousing, which is basically housing for people that aren't chronically homeless, but people that just happen to be down on their luck and find themselves homeless, and we can get them into housing right away. So because there's other programs for chronically homeless. And HMIS is a database of all the homeless people in the county. So that brings us to the moderately priced dwelling unit program. Does anybody have any questions about any of those programs?
No, but I believe that is the MPDU program overview is item number 2 on the agenda, item number...
Oh, okay, so we're there.
34617. Thank you.
So basically what the moderately priced dwelling unit program is an inclusionary zoning program which requires developers and anybody developing in the city of Annapolis, if they're building for sale housing, they have to, in their 10 or more units, they have to provide 12% of their units for moderately priced units, and if it's a rental project, they have to produce 6% of their units for rental.
I'm told that there's some sort of loophole where
it's called, that's how we got the homeowner fund. If the loophole is basically, if they, because of a term called rational nexus, you have to provide some sort of benefit to the developer to do this.
Correct.
So we give them a density bonus. But a lot of times they can't use the density bonus. They can't use the density bonus. They can't even build to their maximum density. So we charge them a fee, which is called a fee in lieu, and it's 4% of the construction and grading, all their permit costs. So just to give you an example, one of them just paid us $250,000, which is how that fund just doubled.
What's the current?
The current amount in the fund is $500,000. So to be eligible to be in the program, people have to be at 100% or less of median. So this program's kind of structured toward our workforce, because we have programs for people at 80%. But we found that people at 100% have an even harder time because they can't get into the programs that are for 80%, and they really still can't afford housing. So it's set at 100%. They have to either be a city resident or they have to be a city employee. Or they can be a teacher or staff member in a school that's included in the Annapolis Senior High District, and those are the schools. So it'd be Annapolis Senior High, Annapolis Middle, Hillsmere Elementary, and Rolling Knolls. Or somebody that's employed at the Naval Academy, or a resident of the county who is disabled. So and you cannot own property, because the program is to make housing affordable to people that can't afford housing. So those are the requirements for people to be eligible to participate in the program. You're going to find, like in Annapolis, you'll find that it's the policemen that are just entry-level policemen, or we've had entry-level firemen. We have staff here, IT people, and because so it's basically your workforce people.
Do you have any data or demographics on who is in the program, who's been a recipient?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have that in here?
No.
Okay.
No, it's a great big database. I mean, I can...
Some sort of like report that kind of boils it down so that we can know who's being most served by the program?
Right. Now, in the rental, even though it's for people, because I just did a monitoring, so for the rental, even though it's for people at 100%, it's serving people lower than that. There's rarely anybody that's in there that's at 100% of median. But you have to be able to pay the rent, and the rent isn't a subsidy. You can use a Section 8 voucher, but the rent isn't subsidized, but the rent is half the rent that is the regular rent. For example, I think a 1-2 bedroom is like $1,000, where the 2-bedroom regular ones are like $2,000. The rents are set at 80%. Rents are set at 80% of the fair market rent that HUD So people that are in there basically have to be working or have some sort of, now, they just accepted a lady that's on SSI. So, but most of the people at 1901 are they're below the 100%. Now, the home buyers are at a little bit, they're higher, but they're still at, they can't be over 100%. And the deal with them is they have to be lendable. They're buying a house. They have to go to classes, they have to go to home ownership classes and get a certificate, and they have to be the bank. You go to a bank. It's just like anybody else that would buy a house. So you have to have good credit, and you have to be able to get a loan. So,
What type of advertising do you do? Is there any partnership with HACA so that residents who are paying market rent are kind of more or less ushered or
they get
guided
notified.
towards? HACA does, or the
Yeah,
resident?
everybody does. HACA gets notified, Lighthouse gets notified, Community Action Agency gets notified.
Are there success stories with HACA resident moving into one?
I'm trying to remember if there's,
I mean, I would think of that as
the problem
a
that we have
success
with
story.
HACA residents is, even though they're paying market rate, their credit isn't good enough to get a loan, they're not as lendable.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to, work on their credit. I'm trying to think, I just remember one person where we had success with HACA residents becoming homeowners when we do acquisition, we did an acquisition rehab project in Clay Street that required everybody to get one of those homes be somebody from the housing authority. And that was a pretty good success story.
Yeah, it seems to be working really well. And I've
Does
been
it?
in a lot of those houses, and
Aren't they beautiful?
they are keeping them up
Yep.
beautifully, and I think it's working out well,
Right,
as far as I know, at least.
the mortgages are way more affordable because they don't have to pay any interest on their loans.
Oh.
So that's basically how the program works. And if you turn the page, you can see these are the properties that we had in the city. So the big rental property, there's 18 units there. At it used to be called 1901, and then it became the Point, and now it's Bell and Annapolis at West. So they're on their third owner. There's one vacancy right now. I'm working with the lady that was in the paper the other day.
Oh, that's excellent, Teresa.
So I tracked her down, called her up, and we're trying to.
That's
Get it.
excellent.
Yeah, I'm just keeping my fingers crossed because again, it's that credit score thing. So I just talked to her a little while ago. The two that were for sale it says Sailor's Key. They were very, very small. It was very, very difficult to sell them. They sat on the market for 6 years or longer. They were 2 bedrooms, very small units, 850 square feet. Well, never
350?
850
I
square
thought you
feet.
said 350. I was
And
going to say, I've rented hotel rooms.
I know, they
bigger
were
than
very
that.
small. They finally sold. They had to lower the price. We'll never do that again.
Where are they?
They're on the corner of on the corner of Washington Street and Eastport and Bay Ridge Avenue. It's an up and a down. It was our very first one, so we learned our lesson. Don't do that anymore. We had Uptown at Murray Hill. There were 3 in there. People were jumping over each other to buy those because they were 3 bedrooms. They had a garage. They sold for about $250. That's how they priced out. Voucher Place, again, it was like Sailor's Key. They were really small. They were 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. Took a long time to sell them. They had to lower the price quite a bit. Finally got them all sold. So the next batch that's coming up is Aristiel and Rocky Gorge.
Do we have any insight into what the size and if they'll be comparable to the other units, or if
They're
they'll
not going to
more
be
like a
small.
voucher?
They'll be the normal size of the rest of the development. Because we put legislation, we changed the legislation to not allow.
Is Rocky Gorge definitely coming in?
Yeah, it's moving along. So anyway, so the MPDU program produces the homeownership trust fund. And this is a list of what can be used, the money can be used for. Basically, it's to be able to provide home ownership to people. Again, they have to be the people that are at, 100%, meet the program requirements. And basically what we've been doing with the money, we only just got all this money. I mean, within the last 6 months or so, because we had a little bit of money. And what we use that for is the administration of the program, because we need somebody to do the eligibility determination, and we have no staff. I lost my staff person that did that and the housing rehabilitation program about 8 years ago when we had the budget crunch. So I lost staff and I had to run these programs, so I farmed them out to the county, Arundel Community Development Services, who has an excellent housing rehabilitation program, is fully staffed, and they can do it much better and much cheaper than we could. And the MPDU program, the skills that they have is the same skills that they need for the housing rehabilitation program in determining eligibility, and it's so we can use the money for administration, and we have in the past used the money for settlement, closing, and down payment expenses for some of the folks that bought the houses on the Habitat houses on Clay Street that you were talking about, Fred. So I'm in the process, now that we have a reasonable amount of money, putting together a program that's for down payment, settlement expenses, so that people can buy homes. And it's the way I've constructed it, and it hasn't, I'm still working on it. It hasn't come before the committee yet because it's still under construction. But the notion is, for example, like the folks that are going to be buying homes at the Glen, they're getting ready to purchase their homes. Some of those folks are going to need down payment, settlement expense help, maybe a soft second. So it would be for people like that need a little bit of help to just get, they might be qualified for like $190,000 and the place is $210,000, so you got a little bit of a gap there. We can provide a soft second mortgage. We've done that in the Clay Street neighborhood where we did acquisition rehab, and we used home money and other money to help people to be able to afford to buy them. The county has an identical program. It's called the MAP program. It's a mortgage assistance program.
Mm-hmm.
The county's had it for years, so it's a $30,000. It's a maximum of $30,000 for down payment, settlement, soft second. And the way I've set this program up is identical to their program. They've been running the program for, well, I've been here 20 years and they had the program then, so they've been running the program 20 years. They do all these homeowner classes and stuff, and they have people that participate in that are from the city, but it's hard for them to afford housing in the city. So that would be another source of people who would participate in the program. I'm proposing to have them, again, manage the program because it's very, it's really intensive program to do all this paperwork. We don't have staff. It's really cheaper to farm it out. They have staff that does it. So as soon as I get it all written up, I've got the policies written up, I've got the procedures written up. It's got to go to the law office first to make sure that it meets the requirements. And then it'll chug its way through the process. So it'll go to the law office, and then they'll look it over, and then it'll come to the committee. And then it'll go to the city council. It'll go all the way through.
You mentioned that the funds that you received recently were a real shot in the arm to the program. Have we had problems collecting funds? There seems to be no shortage of development.
At the time that they pay them is when they get their permits. So the projects have taken that long to get developed to get to the point where they get their permits. Because we had a long time there where stuff sat, during that whole downturn in the economy. So there were a lot of projects that just they kind of stopped.
Do we have 100% compliance from the developers, or what is that like? It is.
Yeah, I mean, they don't get their permits. They can't get their permits if they don't sign the agreements.
And
So
in terms of writing the check, we're having success there?
Yeah. They can't get the permit without writing the check. So and they can't get the permit without signing an agreement. So we haven't had any. I mean, of course, they complained, but we've had 100% compliance. We've also, this year,
I'm shocked to hear that, by the way. Shocked, I tell you.
Does 100% compliance or that they complained about? So the other thing we used it for was this year in our housing rehab program, we didn't have a lot of money because we got a cut in our Cdbg, and we had a pipeline of 6 homeowners now that program helps people at 60% of median. Typically seniors that use the program. So we had a pipeline of 6, and we only had enough money for 3. So we took $40,000 out of the trust fund to add onto that so we could help more people. And we had to cut down on the amount that we were giving people and had to kind of say, okay, we're only going to do code issues.
And those were for rehabilitation of properties?
Now, what's really cool about having ACDS do it is they leverage money from the Maryland Housing Rehabilitation Program, which is a state program, and also they get lead money. So the city chips in like 30, and then ACDS comes up with another 15,000 plus other money. So we're able to leverage. That's another good reason to have them do it, is because they leverage other money, and they can do more than we could do. So.
Do you have any projects on the horizon that you're working on now from either the block grants or from the trust fund?
They'll be coming forward to you.
Okay.
The applications are all in. They're in Google Drive right now. I didn't want to dump them on you. There's also an evaluation that I have to do. It's a review that HUD requires for each project that I have to do, because it has to be eligible, it has to meet national objective, it has to do this, it has to do that. It's like a 30-page screening document, so all the projects have to be screened. Once I screen them, I'll make sure that they meet all the requirements. Right now they're in Google Drive, but I haven't let them loose yet. I will at the end of the month, and then they will come to you, and you guys will read them, and they'll come in, make a presentation. So Cdbg projects are typically, we put out an RFP, people apply. The only project that we do internally, Cdbg, that we don't go out and get applications for, is we've used it for the Stanton Center. That's our only city project, and we've spent a lot of money on the Stanton Center.
Teresa, speaking of the... Oh, I didn't know you had...
Alderman Payon was...
Oh, I didn't discuss, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is the Timothy House or Timothy Gardens project part of any of these?
No. It's all their own financing. That's a low-income housing tax credit project.
Right. Understand they're going well, but thank you.
It's going well. Yeah, well, not surprised.
Yep. Thank you.
Alderwoman Tierney?
And what's really cool about Clay Street, if you think about it, we've touched every single subsidized housing project now, except for Morris Blum, and we did get a $20,000 grant from Home Depot to redo their community room.
Looks good.
So that was, that turned out really nice. And I have to give Zena a lot of credit. She worked very, very hard on pulling it off. She did a really, really good job.
Excellent.
Teresa, I really have to commend you for reaching out for services with, where you didn't have staff to go to the county and share their resources. It's
Well,
very...
they have an excellent, ACDS is an excellent organization, and Kathy Koch is.
Yeah. I have a question. If I'm at, forgive me if this is naive, but I was trying to explore all the areas. I tutor at Stanton Center. I walk out of Stanton Center, and there's like a cul-de-sac right across the street. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's...
You mean Timothy Gardens?
They're separate homes. No, they're separate homes. I'm across the street from Stanton Center. I walk...
They're town,
I'm on...
they're town. The towns or the individual houses?
They're individual houses. I was just wondering if that was part of any... Because my concern is that it's... I'll park my car there. It's... I should have a Google map. But there's some houses that are just, stopped in the middle of construction with just their Tyvek, their insulation. And it just looks like they ran out of funding, and I didn't know if those are
Well,
ours.
some of those houses, I'm not really...
I'm not on Washington Street. I'm off of Washington. It's a... If I'm
Oh,
driving...
you're talking about the guy on Northwest Street.
Okay. Yeah.
We can't get him to do anything.
Oh, okay.
He didn't run out of funding.
Okay. So you know what I'm
He's an
talking...
absentee landlord.
Oh, okay. All right.
If you see stuff like that, it's typically an absentee
It's an
landlord.
okay. Thank you. Thank you.
I wish we could. I know the people on that street have begged and pleaded, but he keeps renewing his permit. Yeah. So we can't really do anything about it. But the house on Northwest Street so the Habitat houses that are there, that was paid for. Well, I'll zip through. You'll see on the next page there's some pictures of some of the stuff that we've done with our money. So the houses that are, if you look at Clay Street, what it looked like back when we started our community legacy program, and you can kind of see this condition the Stanton Center was in. After we got through, we used Cdbg money to tear down the stuff that was there on West Washington and built those beautiful Habitat houses. And then we've done stuff, and I'll go through. These are just representative. They're not all of them. They're just kind of ideas. We did a lot of Help the Parole Health Center a lot with fixing stuff and rehab. Here's that Habitat project on Clay Street. So that's kind of what it looked like.
Wow.
And then you can see the after, which was the Habitat project. Same with this is another Clay Street Habitat project where we gave them money to buy and clear the site, and then they built those two lovely homes. The next one is Hope Rising. It's on Hilltop. We use block grant money for the public facilities, water, sewer to connect up. Homes for America's Homes at the Glen. We used block grant to put in their playground, and the city gave them a pilot. These folks in the next year or so are going to be able to buy these. It's a tax credit program which allows people to lease. It's a lease purchase program. So all the time that they're living there, part of their rent goes in a fund for them for down payment and settlement expenses, and then at the end of the 15 years they get to buy it at a discount. So they may pay $80,000 or $100,000 for a $200 and some thousand. So it gives them like immediate equity. It's the low income housing tax credit program, same program that HACA has to use, and same program at Oberry. It's just that this developer decided to do it as a lease purchase. And they're lovely, they're beautiful. I don't know if you've been over there, but they're all in, So hopefully our trust fund money will help these folks that are living there become homeowners. The next project was another Homes for America Bay 4 senior apartments. When that originally went up, we used Cdbg money, some of it for acquisition and to install the public improvements. And then we did some other work there, just minor safety stuff. This is a typical before and after. This is on Northwest Street, a typical house that we did using community legacy home and Cdbg funds for acquisition, rehab, and closing costs. So we used the block grant to do the rehab. We used the home money to do some of for the acquisition, and then we used the legacy money to do the acquisition, the Cdbg to do the inside, and the home money for the help with closing costs and settlement expenses. So some of these things get kind of complicated, and we have to work with partners on that. So.
Was the city the record owner of this after the acquisition? What does that mean there?
The property, the way we work it out is the nonprofit acquires the property, and with a deed of trust that they have to pay the money back.
And which nonprofit was it in
This
this
is
one?
this is another Homes for America.
Are we still working with them?
No.
Any particular reason?
Well, one is because they really build rental property, so they don't have staff anymore to do these small deals, and we don't have the kind of money we used to have to do this. And we pretty much covered the whole neighborhood, so we actually got to a point where we ran out of inventory, we ran out of homes to buy. So we're not doing it anymore. To that extent, mostly when we do it with Habitat. Like we did we're doing 123 Clay Street. So if you go down the end of Clay Street, that salmon color house that's down at the end, that's an acquisition rehab, as is one of the Town Pines Court.
Is there just not enough funds there to do any large-scale rentals with
There's
them?
not inventory to do large.
Oh, I know. It looks like Clay Street has been redeveloped to its almost capacity, but there are other areas outside of Clay.
There's really not. There really isn't a lot of, for people whose houses are starting to get a little run down. We have our homeowner rehab program. So.
Has there been any thought to buy land that is undeveloped and then to partner with Homes for America to develop affordable?
Can't afford it. We can't afford to do that because
Okay.
the land costs in the city. I had thought about doing land banking, where you would buy foreclosures. It's real complicated, and then I talked to the county, my counterpart in the county, and she said acquisition rehab nowadays is really hard. ACDS does do a lot of it, but they can't sell them. So there really isn't a market for it anymore. And there really isn't a neighborhood in the city that you could target as a neighborhood that's blighted like Clay Street was back then.
With the new RAD program that the HICA is going through, so understanding that the way that it works is now HICA owns the properties, there's a lien against the properties that HUD has. The RAD program acts to sever the lien so that HICA is its own free agent of the property, and HUD no longer has the lien against the property. HUD is still the funding source, so they still have metrics and they still have to report, they still have to, HUD is still an active partner, but they no longer have the ownership interest in the property through the RAD program. So it frees up.
That's not the way I understand the RAD program.
How do you understand it?
The way I understand the program on going forward to redevelop like Newtown, they would have to have a partner. They would have to have a private nonprofit or for-profit partner to redevelop that, and they wouldn't end up being the majority partner.
Correct.
The nonprofit would be the majority partner, and the nonprofit, or the for-profit, whatever it is, the private partner would have control over the property.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Okay.
I think that after the HUD lien is severed, then
See, I don't think there's a HUD lien. The thing that, let me see if I can, HUD doesn't own the property.
Correct.
Housing Authority owns the property.
Correct.
The thing that HUD has is like a trust over the property that says that they have to follow the rules.
So if it's trust or lien, that the RAD acts to sever that so that Housing Authority now has the ability to engage another partner by way of the property.
They can do that. They can do that now.
It's been communicated to me that they are limited to only the programs that HUD has and HUD offers, and HUD will allow them to participate in. But in the RAD program, it then opens the window to participating on a larger scale. It looks like right now they are going for the low-income housing tax credits. It's my understanding that in low-income housing tax credit, it's kind of three partners in the deal. You have the investor, who then has the 99% ownership interest. The then remaining 1% is divided generally between the developer, landlord, and then the housing authority. The rub there is trying to make sure that the 1% is divided in a way that housing authority still has the majority share, but for many of the developer landlords, they want to control the ability to make profit. So to give over 51% of the 1% to housing authority is not something that's attractive to most of them, because they want to be able to set the rules to kind of guide the profit there. Is that your understanding?
If you look at the way Oakbury Court and College Creek Terrace and Annapolis Gardens were done, pre-RAD, the only difference is with RAD, the way I understand it is, it now becomes project-based Section 8.
Correct. But it's my understanding that those properties were redeveloped under a different funding structure.
They were, yeah, because RAD didn't exist.
Correct.
RAD didn't exist, so they did low-income housing tax credit, and they did other CDA money, and so the way those projects are structured in terms of the rent, some of them are ACC units, some of them are Section 8 units, and some of them are what they call tax credit units.
Correct.
So the difference would be in the new deal, they'd all be project-based Section 8.
Correct.
Unless they did they put some market rated. But have you seen the results of the RFP that went out?
I have not yet.
Okay, because it'll be interesting to see who responded.
It will be. The low-income housing tax credits are, my understanding, competitive credits, so it
Extremely
will
competitive.
need to be a partner that's bankable there as well.
Absolutely. I mean, Timothy House went, before Homes for America started it, a group called National Foundation for Affordable Housing wanted to buy it. And they spent about $1.2 million trying to get to the low-income housing tax credits, and they were never able to pull it off.
Oh, wow.
So it's very, very competitive. Now, we do have a project in Annapolis that was awarded tax credits.
What was that?
It's called Town Courts. It's right behind Dunkin' Donuts on West Street, over by the school, over by the
Near the Monarch Academy.
Monarch Academy.
And the city applied for those
No,
credits?
the city doesn't apply for tax credits. The
Right.
developers apply for tax credits. And that's they were awarded tax credits. I don't know if they're going to be able to keep them because they have a real problem with the zoning of the
Who's the developer for that property?
Pearl. Pearl, Phirl. They're not local.
Excuse me, Teresa, what would, with the RAD program, what would then be your interface with that? Are you what's your interaction with the RAD program? Are you said you read the RFP. Is that just a separate process than what you're involved with?
I'm sort of involved,
Sort of.
the other projects I was involved in because I was able to get money to kind of add to the project. Like, for example, when they redid Oberry Court College Creek Terrace. The College Creek Terrace part, I got like $50,000 to tear down the part that was going to be built on by Habitat. So, that's how I was involved in that redevelopment. The Annapolis Gardens redevelopment, we used our Cdbg recovery money. I'm trying to think of how much it was in that project. So I sort of get involved in them in that way. If there's if there's anything the city can do to help out, kind of thing. So, well, just to keep going, let's see, we actually had a great public safety team in the Clay Street neighborhood, but it kind of wore itself out because Paula's not doing any more meetings. They don't have the crime that they used to have back when we first started in 2002. The meeting used to, we used to get you can kind of see it was probably 20 people meeting every week. This is before you, Fred. It was back, I'm trying to think of it might have been even Dean. No, Dean Johnson, and then he became mayor, and then who took his place? It was before Chrisman. But they met every week. It was about 20 people. Pardon?
So the police chief's wife, what was her name? Tolliver.
Yeah, okay.
Ward 2. Yep.
Okay, So it was all during that time. There was a lot of activity. They even had a video patrol, which had a brick thrown through it, and they kind of gave up on that. But it's a lot calmer there than it used to be back in the day. So the committee sort of, kind of disbanded, and now they don't meet anymore. Next picture is, the gate, what we call the gateway. That's all been re-bricked, and we've got our old Fourth Ward kiosk on the corner, and we've got flowers and new lamp posts and stuff. Town Pines Court was a mess. We got about $250,000 to fix that up and re-landscape and repave their parking lot and redo the outside and the inside and
Get unlicensed cars out of
get
there.
unlicensed cars out of the.
We'll talk about that another time.
Yep. The Lighthouse Shelter, we paid for the design. It's about $100,000 of Cdbg money. And then just our homeowner rehab program just shows you the inside and, how we were able to fix it up. We don't do as much of that anymore because, we used to get $450,000 from HUD when I first got here. So we get half of what we got. And so we can't, we have to do the code enforcement first. The next one is that's the Habitat project that we did with on Clay Street. Annapolis Gardens, Bowman Court, that was the Cdbg recovery money. So that's just a sample of what we do.
Thank you
And
for
what your committee will oversee.
Thank you for the hard work over the years and for putting the presentation together for us today and in such a short time frame. I think we spoke about this
Pete made me
midweek
take
last
half
week.
of them out. He said, that's too long.
Well, thank you. Are there any other questions?
No, there's one more thing I wanted to talk to you about.
Okay.
And that's what's coming up. So we've got 10 Cdbg applications. You will get them in January. So our meeting in January, we'll talk about the applications, we'll talk about the process, you'll get a schedule. from me. And then in February, like I said, everybody will come in, they'll make their presentation. March, we'll make our selection, decide who's going forward and how much, to council in April. We'll do an action plan, we'll submit it to HUD. Then at the end of the year, at the end of the program year, I write something called the CAPER, which is the Consolidated Annual Evaluation and Performance Report. So I have to do a report of everything that we did, and so you'll have a good sense of.
Is that the way you do it?
Yep, I'm Italian.
Uh-oh, I'm half.
Paone, come on.
So anyway, that's what's coming up. The other thing that'll be on your agenda is the home ownership assistance trust fund. That'll be coming up.
Expenditures there, or what?
No, it'll depart the new program that we're putting together.
Different from where the MPDU fee in lieu of
No,
goes
to
to?
say
The same-
we're actually
Oh,
putting
but
together
I
a formal
understand.
program now, so that'll be coming before the committee. Can't think of anything else
I have
for housing and community
I have a
development.
random question. I live on East Street in the downtown historic district, and there's sort of a left-hand, right-hand issue with the city. There's a vacant house that's been held up in the courts. It's dilapidated, and there was a classic case. And there's about 3 or so houses like that where the original owner didn't have a will, the family's disputing over it, and it's just sitting. I mean, since I've lived there, these houses have just sat there. Do you ever talk to the city attorney? I mean, is there any interface where there's a possibility there that...
I'm sure that Gary Elson is already working with all of that.
Yeah, but I don't mean
there's
I'm thinking of, wow, we could buy that house and introduce, affordable housing or something in the middle of downtown.
The problem is you can't get title to them. We had that same problem in the Clay Street neighborhood.
Yeah.
On a house that has been vacant. The poor woman that lives next to it, the nephew went in and totally gutted the thing from the roof all the way through, and this woman who lives on one side can nail a nail, and it goes through the house next door, and her heat, and this has been going on for years.
Yeah.
And the department that handles that is Maria Brown,
Yeah.
Inspections and Permits, and they handle that. And we used to have abandoned property meetings.
Yeah.
We were also looking into something called civil receivership,
Yes.
which is where the city can take
That's
possession.
Yes.
But that's in the law office, and that is in the law office.
That-
And also Alderman Budge looked into that, so that's
Yeah.
all, but that's all in the law office, and Gary Elson's been exploring that.
Okay, so this is
that
probably
would
the
be
same
way to-
topic.
Yeah, the
Yes.
civil receivership. That's
yeah.
what Baltimore City does.
That's what I talked at when Maria Broadbent was in DNAP, or we talked about that
Right.
option. 'cause
And Maria
Baltimore-
Brown used to have we used to have a meeting like every couple, 2 or 3 months to deal with the abandoned property. Now, there is a program that we tried to get money for, but it didn't work. We tried to get money there's something called strategic demo, which has to be city-owned property where you can demolish, and we tried to get money to tear down the Public Works building, but it didn't get funded because it wasn't in a real revitalization area.
Okay.
But
Well, that's worth pursuing.
But the civil
This is civil
receivership,
receivership.
I got the CDNA, which is the Community Development Network, to come down and do a training on it,
Really? Jeez. Okay.
because they do it in Baltimore.
Yeah.
And Gary and the staff from the law office sat in, and so he's up on all of that.
Thank you.
But that's the
Thank
way
you.
to go about it.
Are there any other questions? Anything else to add, Ms. Swellman, for the good of the order? Well, thank you for coming out. We appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
listening.
Thank you. Our
Madam.
final agenda item is a committee vote. Ms. Green, is that to vote on the chair, or what do we do? What is that committee vote? I did. So, well then.
What can we vote on?
Well, there's nothing before us at this time to move forward. I think I had envisioned conferring on a calendar, but it's my understanding we don't have to vote on that we can just kind of confer informally on the calendar. If for some reason I'm wrong on that, whatever we agree to informally, we could always reintroduce for a vote at a different time. But that would conclude our agenda. Is there
Madam Chairwoman, I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
A second.
Motion, the motion has passed. The meeting of the Housing and Human Welfare Committee is adjourned. Thank you. Fred, can you help us out with one point I just want to make clear?